How you been?
I'm good. Thank you for talking with me.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, how have you been doing with everything that's been going on? How have
It's,
you been dealing with it, first of all?
it's been a lot. It's been a lot because I got married during COVID and
Oh,
we moved in a couple of months before we moved in together a couple of months before, things got crazy in terms of the outbreak. And just trying to adjust to, living I've lived by myself for 20 years plus as a single
hmm.
dad. So it's been an adjustment, but it's been a good adjustment.
Yeah, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I saw your post on Facebook about this book that you wrote. It's called She Hit Me First, and it sparked my interest because when I read the post about what it's about, I feel like this is something that's so relevant uh,
Thank you.
in the Black community, in my community. I'm Haitian, and I feel like a lot of people, from all over will kind of, um, relate to what's going on in this book. So I had to get it, and then I really thank you for deciding to talk with me about it. Yeah, so for us to start, like, why don't you give us a short introduction of yourself and what you do?
Are we recording now?
Yes, yes, we are.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So,
So a full-time job is I'm a counselor and a teacher at a community college, and I teach career life planning for students that are undecided about school, and I also teach life skills for higher ed, which some colleges call college success. So I've been doing that for 13 years and trying to branch out on my own and become independent as an author. I want to start, writing things that my community could connect with, as well as the academic community could connect with. And my organization is called Hood to Higher Education. And what I try to do is bridge the gap between what's happening in urban communities and their experiences and how they feel they would do in college. Because growing up in the hood, growing up in Oakland, a lot of my friends didn't feel like college was something that they could do, something that they could go to and be successful at. And I would tell them, like, no, you could. You just got to put effort into it, just like anything else. So that's kind of how I got started writing, and that's kind of how I built the foundation for my organization, which is Hood to Higher Ed.
okay, nice. So is that one of your inspirations to writing this book, or did you see a lot of experiences with, with working with the children, how maybe violence has affected them or the
Yeah,
decision to either not go to college or
absolutely. So I don't know how. Are you from Port-au-Prince?
well, I live mostly in Port-au-Prince, but I'm from like the southern part of Haiti.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like growing up in Oakland in the 80s, it was a crack epidemic. Like
Mhm.
drugs were just destroying my community. A lot of my friends end up selling drugs, because that was kind of like the way to make money in the neighborhood. Like we didn't have a whole lot of people, that were positive influences in terms of males, African American males. So a lot of us assume that the way to make money, was to sell drugs. Hi Lauren.
Mhm. Hello.
Hi.
So
Thank
when
you
I
for
was
joining us.
Hmm.
so when I was going, to school in, Oakland, East Oakland, a lot of people felt like that was the way to defend yourself or get respect, was to, if somebody hit you, hit them back. So that's kind of where the idea came from. I saw a lot of fights. I went to Parker Elementary. I went to Grass Valley Elementary, and then I went to King Estates Junior High School. And Lauren's mom went to King Estates as well, and she was 1 year ahead of me. But we just saw a lot of fights. Just random
Mhm.
fights. Sometimes it was related to gangs, and that's pretty much what people did. That's kind of how you got your respect. And I started thinking, like, it has to be an alternative, to violence. It has to be an alternative to, when somebody disrespects you, you don't necessarily have to hit them back. Why don't we show love instead? So just fleshing out this idea and trying to compose a story about it with a positive message, this is what I came up with.
Hmm. Yes, I agree. Like this was a very positive message. Like it was, um, our main character Jamila.
Mhm.
She she had like I felt sorry for her and her sister, but it was like she had a community. She had people who wanted to help her. So it wasn't so um so she had like help. She had an outlet, people who wanted to help her. So do you think that most of those kids, like in real life, in your experience, do you think they have that? They have like teachers who are patient and sweet with them, or and friends, and who are trying to help
I
them?
think
Like, do
they
you see
do.
that?
I
Mm-hmm.
think they do. And I think, I know for me, I had a lot of positive mentors around me, but sometimes I just chose to ignore it,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it may be the same for some of our youth nowadays. And Lauren, I definitely want you to chime in on this. We have different opportunities, different decisions that we can make in life, like whether it's a good decision or a bad decision. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of my friends, including myself, like I fell a victim to peer pressure, like always trying to fit in, always trying to not show that I was this square. But really, that's who I was, like to my core. So me kind of not being true to myself, I end up doing some things, that I acted out, in terms of doing something outside of who I am naturally. And I think these youngsters nowadays, they're going through the same thing. Like we have mentors at the school, we have mentors in the neighborhood, we have
Mm-hmm.
parents, uncles, aunts that we could confide in, but it's kind of like whether or not we choose to listen to their advice or allow them to mentor us is kind of a decision that we got to make.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. But from my own experience, I don't think that kids always have the opportunity to have a mentor, especially for me, because I went to school in like a predominantly white Asian city. I never really had a teacher that was Black. I had one Black teacher and they got fired like after a year. So it really depends on where you are, if you're able to find a mentor who actually can connect with you and can understand you on a different level. I did end up having a mentor my senior year, and it's because like he was a teacher that I really connected with, and he knew what my dreams were. But it definitely really depends. If a student isn't willing to accept help or accept mentorship, then there's nothing you can really do. You can't force someone to help you or get help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what I'm understanding, Lauren, is like you're saying that it's important to find someone who maybe you can connect with, somebody who, from your own community, not necessarily like the same race, right? Or maybe, that's something that's important too, because I think that people who are like you are the most able to understand you, what you've been through, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
you're in a community, like for example, mostly white neighborhoods, like or white children, like or white mentors or whatever, like then, they're not gonna know what you've been through, like or gonna go through as a young Black woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that could make it hard to based on your environment. Well, thank you. And by the way, can we get a small introduction, Lauren?
Uh, yeah, my name is Lauryn Alexander. That's my dad. I'm a sophomore student filmmaker right now in school. I'm going to school at Loyola University in
In Chicago? Oh,
New
okay. I was
Orleans.
like,
Yeah.
okay, okay. Well,
Yeah.
and you're also the illustrator for this book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So was it like Mr. Robert Alexander, like how do you feel that your daughter is like work with you on this project to illustrate it, you know?
I
Because you
feel
could
great.
have.
I feel honored. Lauren is a college student, so when I reached out to her, I was scared. I didn't. I wanted to see if she had time for it.
Mhm.
Um, so I reached out to her. I tried not to be like I need this. She knows how
Mhm.
I can be on stuff. So when she said she could do it, I was like, yeah. We got something going. Um, and I like the drawings. I love the drawings that she was able to illustrate. It would have cost more money for it to be color, so I wanted to make the book affordable. Number one, but I also want to be compensated, you know, for the work that we did. Like, it took me some time to write it. It took her some time to draw these drawings. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's why the price is affordable for teachers, for youth. Pick it up on Amazon. She hit me first. It's available. It's also available on my website, which is hoodtohighereducation.com. We had fun with this project, you know, and I want to allow Lauryn to kind of speak about the illustration process.
Yeah, the illustration. When he asked me to do it, I was shocked because I had never really done illustration type of drawing before. I usually do like charcoal drawing, stuff like that. So I was scared to do it, but like I at the time I was an art student, like I was doing visual art. So I was like, this would be a really good opportunity just for me to try and get some experience. And I liked how they turned out. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think they were very they illustrated like what was going on in each chapter or each little story like perfectly. So yeah, and I like that it's you know, you guys are like keeping it in the family, and you know that way your name as an artist gets out and your father's name, you know, like you guys are, it's like we're helping each other out, and that's in a way I think it's how we can break the cycle too, like, you know, having an open communication. And I like that you know, your father gave you a choice, you know, like he said, he didn't push it on you when he asked you, which I know a lot of parents would be like, hey, I need this done, and that you don't have a choice, and they can like completely invalidate you. So I
I,
think I appreciate that.
yeah, I think she had enough of me doing that, so I had to I had to be strategic in terms of asking her. She could have said no. You know,
Hmm.
she said no to me on stuff recently, and I'm good with that. You know, I know how to take a no. You know, I'm a big boy. I think I was trying to put something, you know, leave something behind where I could always say that, you know, me and my daughter collaborated on something. You know, when we talk about like leaving a legacy, you know, a lot of people, they instantly jump to, oh yeah, I had children. You know, my children are going to carry on the legacy, you know. But I'm thinking about in terms of like my career as a counselor or educator, I can't pass that job down to Lauryn, Jalen, Robbie, or Isaiah. I can't do that. They may not want to do that. So I figured, you know, I thought with the arts, this is something that I could leave behind. So in my second book, the first book was male dominated, and it was pretty much my childhood memoir.
Okay.
Not being able to see it really good, but it's called "Can't Let Nobody Ride My Bike," and it encapsulated a time period at the end of junior high school. Now they have middle school in the Bay Area, but when I was in school, we had junior high, which ended in the ninth grade. Then you transition to high school. And for me and my peers, like that was a trying period when I spoke to like peer pressure, bullying, drugs, you know, whether or not to just focus on sports or the streets. That was like a theme. So I wanted to write this book, you know, not so much to make money, but I wanted to kind of to speak from a standpoint of like how hard it is being an academic in the hood, you know, and not falling a victim to peer pressure, not, you know, figuring out how to avoid bullies. Maybe you are a bully, figuring out how not to be one, you know, just a lot of things you deal with in East Oakland. And the crack epidemic of the 80s, it was a hard time. Like it destroyed our community, you know, and if you don't have a lot of positive role models, you know, around you, that's something that you could be influenced by. You could look at a drug dealer and that could be appealing, like no lie. You know, a lot of people, you know, think like, well, how did you want to be a drug dealer? If you don't see a lot of computer scientists and engineers making money, you don't really think that that's a viable option. And I've seen that, you know, with a lot of my best friends, my best childhood friends, like they fell a victim to that. So that book was male dominated, and I wanted to kind of write something kind of from a female standpoint. And I had some best friend females in junior high and high school that had to fight. You know, you think that's a lot of people think that's a boy thing to do, but a lot of girls had to defend themselves when I was coming up
Yeah.
in East Oakland. So that's what She Hit Me First kind of came about.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, when you mentioned the crack epidemic, I've heard from what I know about it, I've heard, a lot of different standpoints and viewpoints, and some documents that I've read, some people, believe that the war on crime is what was the real problem, that, the way they targeted the Black community and unfairly created this, chaos that we are still dealing with now, because a lot of our Black men ended up in jail, couldn't get jobs, couldn't vote, lost a lot of their freedom. So do you, what's your standpoint on that? Like, do you think, it was as bad as, the policing of it hurt us more than help us with winning the crack epidemic?
During the Reagan administration, that's where the war on crime, the war on drugs first spawned from. So it absolutely decimated the community. They used terms like hard on crime. The 3 strikes law came out of that particular policy, where if you were already a felon and you got 2 more strikes, and a total of 3, you could be sent away for 25 to life. And then we started imposing things in the US and especially in California called mandatory minimums, meaning a mandatory minimum means if you got caught with even a small amount of marijuana or cocaine, you would have to do 3 to 5 years. That's mandatory. So now you're talking about folks that are maybe had 1 strike, 1 felony. They're being released into society. They're formerly incarcerated. They're trying to make something of themselves. On every application, they ask you that question: have you ever been convicted of a felony? You have to check that box. Why? Because there's checks and balances. They have a way of figuring it out. They run your name through a database. They know that you're locked up. You don't qualify for government assistance. You don't qualify for a Section 8 as a felon. You can't vote. Now, the voting law, they're recently reversing that, for felons. But the government assistance, food stamps, Section 8, not being released into society and not having access to things that can make your life better, you can't even live with a person that has government assistance or that qualifies for Section 8 without them losing their property, their
Really?
rental.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it's bad. So the answer to that question is, I don't think that the Reagan administration and the Clinton administration knew exactly what they were doing. They knew that they had to come down hard on something that was foreign to us. Like before crack hit the scene, we never seen anything like that. Okay, a lot of people could say heroin was a bad thing that hurt our communities, but it wasn't disastrous like crack was. So the laws were put in place. Michelle Alexander wrote about this. There's a documentary called 13th Amendment on Netflix that's powerful, where Ava DuVernay covers this to the fullest. So a lot of people have done a better job of kind of explaining it than I'm doing. But the answer to your question is, it was a terrible thing that did to Black and brown folks all throughout the United States, and we're still paying for it.
Yeah. All of that leads to more crimes when people can't get jobs and they need to provide for themselves and their families. And it's like, what other choice do they have? So it's like it just keeps going and passing down. So it's unfortunate. And one last question I wanted to ask, it all starts in the home, right? It starts in the home with the mother. I noticed the mother, Jamila's mother in this book was a single mother. I want to know, like, does that play a part in it? And also, how do we break the cycle? How can we break the cycle from passing it down to our children, from us, like the new generation?
I'm so glad you asked me that question, Judith. I think I saw it growing up, and it was almost like my father, and he'll tell you this, is almost like he had something to prove. When I got spankings, and I'm just gonna keep it real, I wasn't the best kid. I just wasn't. I was mischievous.
Everyone goes through that stage.
Cover your ears,
right?
Lauren. I knew how to BS in front of parents. Like, I knew how to put on my nice hat when I had to be nice. I said yes, ma'am, and yes, sir. But when I was in the streets, I did things, you know, I fought, and, you know, I wasn't that stand-up person that I feel like I am now, you know. So my father, growing up in the 80s when it was rough in Oakland, my father would make it a point to come down hard on me, you know, and I use the expression, he would lay the goon hand down, because he wanted to show me that, okay, if you acting one way in the street, at least when you come into this household, you're going to respect me. And this was like that with all of my friends. One of my best friends was a Mexican gentleman by the name of Jesus Ramirez, and his father would whoop him in front of us. Another one of my best friends, Scooby, his father will whip him in front of us. So not only are you feeling the physical pain of being hit with a shoe or a belt, but you have the humiliation of your friends watching on. So I dealt with that, and I wanted to write about that. And then, you know, as I started studying psychology, and I ended up going to graduate school. I was lucky enough to be accepted and finish graduate school in counseling education. I started thinking of a part of going through my graduate school was to do therapy for myself. And as I'm working with a therapist, you know, I'm her client or what have you, start thinking about childhood trauma. Started thinking about the bruises, the wounds that I have from childhood and what I haven't dealt with, right? So I started feeling like maybe my father was actually teaching me how to hit as opposed to resolving conflict. There's a difference. So what happened with me was, since I was able to withstand the impact of a grown man hitting me with his hand when I went out to the street on 78th in East Oakland, I started not to fear people that was my age. I didn't fear people that was my age because I could take a hit from a grown man. And he also taught me that if I had an issue with somebody, I should resolve it with my hands. And that's what I did for a long time. You know, if somebody hit me, I hit them back as in the book. And he would actually tell me that. I got into more trouble talking back to teachers, stealing, cutting class. Those are the things I got in trouble for, but I never got in trouble for fights, because my father and my mother, to a certain degree, felt like if I was defending myself, then I had a right to. So that's kind of where the impotence came from in the book. I want to, like you mentioned, Judith, I want to undo the cycle. I want to break the cycle. You know, every situation doesn't result in a smack from your parent. And Lauren will tell you, like, that's how I was as a father. I have an autistic son named Jalen. I didn't know he was autistic until he was 5 years old. We never ran an assessment on him. We never ran an assessment. So what I took as disrespect was actually a motor skills issue. It was a processing issue, which I harbor guilt because of the unnecessary whippings that I gave Jalen. I gave Jalen a lot of whippings that didn't have anything to do with him not listening. It didn't have anything to do with him being disrespectful, but it's a motor skills, a processing issue that many students, many people that have Asperger's suffer from. So I'm working through that in therapy, you know? So there's a lot of reasons for me writing She Hit Me First. There's a lot of things I could do that would be considered a cash grab, but this wasn't one of them. You know, I wrote this from the heart. And like I said, my other book dealt with a boy. I want to write from a girl's perspective, and I want to deal with like generational trauma. Like what are parents like really teaching their kids when they hit us?
Wow, yeah, that's very, very, amazing that you realize that, because, you just made a point that a lot of the times, the kids are not bad kids. I don't believe in, bad kids. I think there's something going on. Something has to go on.
Absolutely.
For them to act a certain way. So unfortunately, a lot of parents, they don't think about that. They get frustrated. They, and they don't know, like especially immigrant parents sometimes, or, parents who are just not educated enough or understanding enough to realize that let's talk with someone and see what's going on and find out. So,
and it was taught to me. Whippings were taught to me. My dad whooped me. That's how I thought to be a father. His dad whipped him, my grandfather. They have a story that they tell to this day, because my father's younger brothers are twins, my Uncle David and my Uncle Charles. They have a story to this day where my Uncle Charles, when he was young, he accidentally scratched the neighbor's Cadillac, right?
Mm.
And my grandfather didn't know which one of the twins did it, so he grabbed both of them by the collar and attempted to throw them through a sliding glass door.
Oh
So that's,
wow.
we're talking about like trauma, we're talking about
Yeah.
abuse. You know what I mean? My grandfather learned it from his great grandfather that this is how you're supposed to instill. You're supposed to instill fear, and you have to get respect from your children by any means. But then it has to get to the point where, as intelligent people, as adults, when do we start saying, "Hey, look, I was wrong. I was wrong for this. I should have handled this a different way." And that's kind of where I got to, at a certain point in life. It took a while, but I'm definitely realizing my mistakes. And I hope parents out there, parents all throughout the world, can try to resolve turmoil or things that you're going through with your child in a different way. And let's stop. Let's break the cycle of passing it down, whippings, passing it down, corporal punishment, right? Let's pass down something that's beneficial, like financial literacy. Let's teach our kids that at an early age, how to manage money, the difference between a good debt and a bad debt, like a credit card or a student loan, right? How to invest, how to invest in property, how to have generational wealth as opposed to generational trauma.
Mm. Right. That's true. Yeah, because I think this is like my take on it, and I could be wrong, but I feel like a lot of parents, like in the older generation, they've had to survive a lot. Like, they had to fight so hard and to survive, and sometimes they had to like, fight. So they're teaching their children to survive by, teaching them violence and things that are not necessarily helpful. But when the way you teach your children to live their lives, like to fulfill their lives, is by teaching them more than just surviving. Like teaching them financial literacy and taking care of their credit report and things like that. So that's I don't know if that makes sense, but there's like, to me, there's a difference between just surviving and living. So that gets passed down too, I think. And Lauren, do you have any input on what we're saying?
Yeah, I really agree with what my dad was saying, and it's like you can either take what your parents did and see like, oh, they did this, or they beat me as a kid and I turned out fine, and so that's how you end up passing it on to your own kids when you don't really evaluate what your parents did and have those conversations with them. Or you could look at it the other way and say, oh, well, they did this, and like this is how I turned out, or these are why I'm having like problems today, because they affect you in your adulthood. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're not having those conversations and like really talking with your parents and evaluating what they did, then it's just going to continue.
Yeah, that's true. And I think the cycle of violence and abuse is so like normalized to us. It's so like ingrained in us that so many people are like so quick to defend their abusers. I hear all the time people say, "Oh yes, I was spanked as a child. I turned out fine. I was, I got whoopings. I got this. I get like, it's like I don't know what's the logic behind that or why. If you guys know why, like some people would just be so adamant about defending their parents. I'm not saying that you're supposed to, just completely like be like shut off your parents or whatever, but sometimes I feel like it's sad and unfortunate that those people are saying, yes, all this stuff happens to me, but I turned out fine. Because really you didn't turn out fine, you know,
I
just
like to
fine.
call it the persecution Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we play. It's competitive. When people are talking about getting whoopings as a kid, like among my friends, and one day I just had to just sit. This is before I wrote the book, before I even had the idea that I was going to write this kind of book, I would sit back and just listen to my friends, and one person would say, oh yeah, my father would send me out in the backyard to get a switch from a tree, and if that switch was too small, he would send me back. Like it was a bragging moment. There was real braggadocious about it.
Mm-hmm.
And another one of my friends, I think it was Scooby, he would say, my father used to hit me with a Hot Wheel racing track, and he would kept going until he saw the marks on my legs, like the purple little welt marks that you get on your legs when you're getting whooped. And one of my friends would be like, well, one time both of my parents whooped me. It was like tag team. My mom whooped me, and then she left the room, and then my dad came and whooped me. And then my friend Carlos would be like, well, my mom tried to throw a hot iron, a skillet at me, and it went on and on probably for like 10 minutes, but they never said like, I'm still dealing with this. Nobody ever said this was wrong. Nobody ever said, maybe I didn't deserve this whooping. Maybe my parents took it too far. It was a braggadocious thing that my friends were doing. And I just sat back like, and I chimed in too. I'm not acting like I'm better than them, because I remember, my father being at a stoplight and reaching over and kind of blindsiding me, and hitting me without me being aware that, he was going to hit me. And those were the worst ones when I didn't know it was coming. Right. So I don't know why we do the persecution Olympics. It's really unfortunate, but it happens in many communities of color.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's funny. I was in Haiti a few years ago, and there was this woman, who was like close to our family, and she had a 3-year-old daughter at that time, right? And one day, I don't remember what the 3-year-old did, but it was something very, very, very small, and she hit the girl like in her head, like. It was like weird. I was like, oh my God, I've never seen that before. But somebody, you're not just thanking the child, like she actually like hit her several times, like right on her head. And so that was so weird. And then just a few minutes later, we were talking, and she said, yeah, my mom, they used to, beat me like right on my head, and that's why every day I have a headache now. She's like, yes, every day I have a really bad headache at night, and I can't sleep in the morning. Like, she was telling me how her getting hit right in the head was affecting her. So it just doesn't make any sense. Like, she's doing the same thing to her daughter. So I was like, so you want your daughter to be suffering with headaches every day for the rest of her life? Does that make any sense? So it's still like, I don't know why human nature is like that, I guess. Sometimes people want.
Lauren, have you seen any of your friends get whoopings or?
A lot of my friends were like, oh yeah, no, I wasn't whooped as a kid. And I was like, that's just a complete shock to me, because I thought it was just like a thing, like all parents did it, like this is what you're supposed to do. Like, no, I wasn't whooped. I don't plan on whooping my kids. That's wrong. And I was like, okay. Like,
do you think it might be cultural?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So if this is a black and brown people of color thing, we have to address it. We gotta address it in our community. Jamila, she learned acts of kindness. Like she wasn't born with, knowing, okay, I'm gonna try to make amends. I'm gonna try to bridge this gap between what I'm going through with this peer, this other student that disagrees with what I'm disagreeing, whatever that may be, cutting me in line, being on a swing. She uses acts of kindness, but she's taught that. Just like we're taught whippings, right? So we have to start instilling in our children more acts of kindness. I honestly feel like this generation gets it though. This generation, I think Lauren had to do some type of service project to graduate from high school. This generation volunteers more than any other generation. They've donated more. They're more socially, I don't have the statistics on this, but they're more socially conscious than any other generation in the past. So maybe this generation is kind of starting, to get on the right track in terms of dismantling the violence, dismantling the hate. But the main character Jamila, she has her friend Imani pull her to the side and like, hey, and when she first meets her, like, okay, yeah, you hit me. You want to hit me again? Like, get it out, like, because I'm not going to hit you
Yeah.
back. I'm not going to give you what you want. Like Imani was kind of planted that seed for Jamila, and then her teacher, Miss Raspberry, was
Mhm.
able to kind of plant this seed for her. Like, okay, let me hip you to Maya Angelou. Let me hip you to Oprah. Well, Oprah is a worldwide philanthropist who does a lot of things. Now, a lot of people think, what Oprah does sometimes is actually hurting some African American men in the entertainment business. But on the flip side, she's doing a lot to give back. Like she's leveraging her
Mhm.
power. And I really think that the reason Obama got as many votes as he did was because of Oprah. Both of them coming
Mhm.
out of Chicago, kind of rallied, wrapped her love around Obama. So I wanted to have, Oprah and Maya Angelou, who I'm still fans. I'm still fans of Oprah, even though what she did to R. Kelly and MJ.
Yeah.
I'm still a fan of hers, just for what she's done, building schools in Africa. Like she didn't have to do that. She's trying, and we're all
Right. Yeah.
human, and fallible to mistakes. So I like how
Exactly.
the story kind of came full circle, with Jamila kind of figuring out, how to be, how to provide acts of kindness as opposed to just continuing the cycle. And then she patched things up with her mom.
Mhm.
She figured out why her mom was like that, why her
Mhm.
mom was doing the spankings, and
Yeah.
this is something that kind of that's the female version of what me and my dad have kind of come to an understanding now that we're both adults. I told him in therapy, hey, bro, you hurt me. You know what I'm saying? Like you hurt me. I didn't feel like you loved me at times. I didn't even feel like you wanted to have me. Like I was able to tell him that in therapy. So that this was my take. This book was my portrait of that.
Mm. Yeah, that's amazing. And anytime that we're able to like tell our stories, like, in different ways, I think it helps, like what you were just saying about changing, writing books like this, offering an alternative because maybe not everybody has that mentor, the Mrs. Raspberry or an Amani to kind of help them see a different way. But if they can find a book about it that can explain it to them, then I think they can think about it. You know, yeah,
Thank you.
and yeah,
Thank
I definitely agree that this generation is changing. So I feel like and I also think part of it is that we're more open-minded about mental health now. Seeking help, acknowledging um, mental health issues and things like that. So I think it all plays a part in this. So
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, thank you both again for speaking with me today, or this evening, I should say. Any last words from both of you guys?
Yes, Lauren, definitely plug, Lauren's Creations. Hood to
Hmm.
Higher Education is my company. I'm the CEO and founder of Hood to Higher Education. My website is hood, HOOD, number two, highereducation.com. And what we do, we are a consulting firm where I write books for everybody. The message is universal, but it it touches the soul of people of color, right? And please follow me on IG, Hood to Higher Education, at Hood to Higher Education. I'm doing virtual workshops all throughout COVID, so I'll continue to do virtual workshops on bullying, career, life planning, college success, memoir writing, and creative writing. So you can follow me at Hood to Higher Education on IG. And also my website is Hood to Higher Education. I'm Robert Alexander. Thank you so much for having me, Judith.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I'll put all the links down below that, all the links that you just mentioned. And you said you're into creative writing, which is also what I'm into. So maybe we can have another discussion about that someday.
I would love to.
Yeah. And Lauren, any last words before we go?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. Okay, so thank you. Here's the book again, you guys. I will put all the links down below, and thanks again, both of you, for
Thank you. Thank you
taking
so
the
much.
time to talk. Yes, no problem.
Had a great time. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye,
Thank
Lauren.
you.